Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Drew. So what I wanted to do today was to talk about sort of where I think we are in terms of the world of branding and marketing and meaning management more generally. My interest, I'm trained as an anthropologist, and my interest is where culture meets commerce. And that's one of the things when you start studying contemporary cultures, Western cultures, that is to say America and Europe, is that you realize an awful lot of. We use kind of orthodox notions of anthropology, which tend to exclude commerce as the villain of the plot. Your anthropology comes to a screeching halt. If you want to give a kind of exhaustive, thoroughgoing account of culture in Western cultures, you're obliged to see how much of it comes from commerce and how those two things work together. So today, I want to give a kind of a broad sketch of what I think is happening in the world of marketing, and then work our way down to some very particular kinds of innovations that we're seeing right now, and I'm calling these last innovations brand creatures. I'm happiest when taking questions as they occur to you, instead of waiting for, if we know anything about culture and the trends that shape culture, is that the old asymmetry that defined the speaker as the speaker and the audience as the passive recipient, that's dead and over, and thank goodness it's gone. So please, will you sing out with questions as they occur to you, and let's build those in to the talk. Good, okay. So I wonder if there's not a new model of marketing. It's very slow coming, and I know I'm ahead of the curve, and I blog a little bit for the Harvard Business Review, and I get these ferocious reactions, ferocious refusals from readers who go, who clearly, as I would say, the captives of the tractor beam of 1955 and still think about marketing in an old-fashioned way. So this model is not inevitable, but it's not here, but I think it is inevitable. And it speaks to what Drew and I were just talking about, and that is the sheer amount of change that's taken place in the world of the cultural creative in the last kind of 10 or 15 or even 20 years. At MIT, we've got this little thing called Futures of Entertainment, where we contemplate chiefly what the digital revolution means to the world of entertainment. And this will be the 6th year this November. I hope you'll join us. If you have the opportunity, please do join us. It's usually in Boston. And so we were thinking, and so what's been interesting about meeting once a year in Boston over the last 6 years is that in the opening years, it was really funny. It had all these kind of very engaged, committed people who weren't quite sure how to think about the problems, right? There was an awful lot of this kind of, how do we think about this problem? How do we just forget the solution? What's the problem? And what's the best way of defining the problem? And 6 years into the evolution of this little event, we now have clarity. It now looks as if the world is taking shape, and it now looks as if that tremendous confusion of the world of the cultural creative is giving way to certain structural patterns are sort of starting to emerge. So that's kind of what I want to talk about here. And in the case of a new model of marketing, clearly what's gone is the kind of bang the drum marketing, and this is the kind of thing that was so powerful after World War II. And we'll all remember that the search for the unique selling proposition, where you went searching for, literally, I've been in offices where people sit down and they have like a template, and they have to define the right terms for this brand is an X to a Y, and they have to build the unique selling proposition in just this way. This is, and then once you had the unique selling proposition, you would load the cannons and fire them as often as loudly as possible, so that every consumer, wherever they were, had perfect clarity on what Tide stood for. We now know that model is done for. It's still active, but it's like it's a zombie, right? It's no longer very interesting because most consumers just go, oh, stop banging that drum. And in fact, I was doing an ethnography for a brander recently, and this woman said, some brands are like that guy at the party who's had too much to drink, and he just won't shut up, and he never lets anybody get a word in edgewise, and he just keeps going on and on and on. You just keep hoping he'll leave. So this model of marketing is, I think, in question, if not on its way out. And this notion that this effort to persuade the the consumer, talk about asymmetrical relationships, that asymmetrical relationship between the brander and the branded is, all that talk of trust and authenticity, I think when you use the unique selling proposition model is just fantastically difficult. So this book appeared 10 years ago, and it's Weinberger and Searles and a couple of, it's got like 15 authors, and I can only ever remember 2 of them. Never the same 2, it turns out. Weinberger and Searles sit down and say, okay, if we have had a digital revolution, what does that mean to marketing? And it must mean that the old asymmetrical model is dead, and that marketing has to be a conversation. If it's going to be anything, it has to look much more like a conversation. I think the metaphor is, I think it's wrong. If we take the metaphor absolutely seriously, we don't need to have cultural creatives anymore. We just have some responsive brand and interested, engaged consumers, and between them, in the course of the conversation, they work out some commercial or mutually acceptable message. And I think that's wrong. I think we really do need cultural creators making cultural meanings and then pushing those out into the stream. And then, of course, consumers will work them and rework them, and in some cases invent them, certainly. But I think there's still a huge role for the cultural creative to be the prime mover of this creative process. So anyhow, that's this kind of, our first moment is bang the drum marketing. Second moment is this Clue Train manifesto that says marketing is a conversation. And I think we're now on the verge of something like murmur marketing. I think we're on the verge of a marketing that is vastly subtler than anything we've seen before. And I like to use this as an example. Oreo was recently celebrating its 100th year by using references as magnificently obscure as this one. I mean, this is a meteor shower is being memorialized in this ad, and it's fantastically obscure, and no one goes, in the old days of Unilever unique selling propositions, actually I think it was probably P&G, you can just imagine the response you would have got from senior marketing managers when you tried to explain to them why this was the compelling idea for this ad, that you wanted to celebrate a meteor shower that no one had ever heard of and no one much cared about. What kind of event is it? An event taking place far away. So I think we're now engaged in a new kind of marketing that becomes, it's not conversational, it's subtler than conversational. The person I think who gets credit here is Henry Jenkins, who was my colleague at MIT and is now at USC. And he's the guy who really slayed the dragon. He's the St. George of the marketing world, to the extent that he sat, intellectuals after World War II, partly in response to the bang the drum marketing and the horror that was, too obvious kind of commercial messaging in the 50s and the 60s. The intellectuals said, the commercial world dumbs down culture, culture becomes a salted earth. Well, in fact, Kennedy appointed Minow to study TV and talk about the cultural implications of TV, and Minow's, kind of the result of his royal commission was, TV is a wasteland. That's in fact where that phrase comes from. He called it a vast wasteland from which nothing good can ever come, culturally speaking. So intellectuals were insisting that commercial culture was very bad, and that people who consumed that culture were rendered idiotic, or they were mesmerized, or they were dumbed down in one way or another. And Jenkins said, well, let's take a look at this intellectual proposition. And he studied people watching Star Trek. And he said, wow, not only is this intellectual notion, supposition that people are mesmerized by the silver screen or the tiny box wrong, in point of fact, if you look at Star Trek enthusiasts, you see people are fantastically engaged and attentive to fine details. And one of the pieces of the research that I thought was most charming was he was talking to people who were mapping the USS Enterprise, is it, I think? And what they would do is say, okay, in every scene in which they leave the sick bay and we know they're going to the engine room, they always turn right. And that must mean, and they started mapping the USS Enterprise on the basis of what characters were doing on the screen, which came as a big surprise to the scriptwriters, who went, really, the engine room is to the right of the And they began to rewrite the show in response to this map that had been created by passionate viewers of the program. But that was our first glimpse of the fact that consumers weren't dupes who were dumbed down by TV. In fact, they were passionately engaged and very much involved. So this media literacy, let's use this as the term for it, I think is one of the reasons we can do this murmur marketing. And this is the tough sell now. You know, it's always been, I think the creative world has always been a terrible kind of conflict between creatives who are capable of fantastically subtle messaging and the client who just wants to keep things simple, thank you very much, because they have to make their numbers. And the good news, I think, is that the whole proposition is getting more rich and sophisticated, and it should be easier and easier for those of us who make our livings as cultural creatives of one kind or another to prosecute the subtler argument and to get our best work on the screen in the design, in the world. It's still a tough sell, but I think, you know, we have history on our side, so to speak. This is just a great example. This is a Volkswagen ad that's playing now in the States, and it plays out this hand clap notion, and the guy's in his, well, I'll spare you the full details, but they used the music of Shirley Ellis, who did this popular song in 1956, and typically an ad would use some piece of popular culture, and they wouldn't credit the original authors, but these ad makers, is it Arnold? Who does the Volkswagen work? I think it might be Arnold. Is it? They put Shirley Ellis in the ad as a piece of kind of graffiti on a wall, and she only appears literally for like four frames or something. If you don't really look, you don't see it. But it was a lovely way of kind of acknowledging her contribution to the ad. In the old days, it would have been an inside joke, right? Only other advertisers would see what you'd done there and have given you credit for it. But in fact, there's so much media literacy now, and I think people are so much more engaged, everybody kind of got the joke. And so I think it's some indication of the kind of stuff you can work into a spot. So let's just say, for the purposes of argument, there's something like, and we don't have to call it murmur marketing, we can call it anything, but that there is a murmur marketing upon us. And it's clear that once you take this point of view, some of the innovations that have taken place in the world of marketing, this is of course the campaign for Real Beauty from Dove. That used to be something Unilever wasn't going to go anywhere near. Even what, 10 years ago, it was beautiful women, and that's all, thank you very much. And the idea of having real women was just truly unthinkable. But that's now, I think, that we're engaged in more sophisticated, engaged marketing, a contextualized marketing that's fully responsive to the world in which consumers live. This becomes not just possible, but the smart thing to do, the right thing to do creatively and pragmatically. Transmedia is this a notion that's, I'm sure, circulating here, but generally speaking, it's the notion that a commercial message, or in classically, some kind of entertainment proposition like Batman, has many versions. It's got several movie versions, the comic book versions, I think some novel executions. What else are some fanfic? Certainly lots and lots of fanfic. The old notion was the original document is the sacred text, and everything else is a variation and kind of off license and not credible. And Henry Jenkins is arguing that in fact, no, we take the literary proposition here is happening in all of these media at once. And so we don't have one story. We've got 6 or 7 versions of Batman in play at any time, and sophisticated readers have the other 6 versions playing in their heads as they read that 7th version. So we get fabulous new complexity here, right? Not just attention to the narrative complexity, but to all of the other creative decisions made by all of those directors or writers or fan fiction people. All of that stuff is in play. So it's really rich. New media, of course, is everywhere, and that's one of the things, as Drew and I were talking, that has sort of raised so many questions for the world of marketing. We've seen it played out in this Fiesta movement, where they ask cultural creatives to make creative on behalf of the brand. This is a club in here somewhere in London that's now famous in the States, but it's like has mythical properties because none of us have ever been there. And this is the only evidence we have. We're like 18th century villagers who've heard about something happening in Paris. Does anybody know this? I think it's called the 223 Club or something. Anyhow, it's perfect, as you can see, meant to be, I think, Victorian in character. And a lovely kind of just, you step out of, it's like time travel, right? You step out of the here and the now into the 18th century as you join this club. Ring a bell? Anybody? No. So maybe it's completely mythical then. Maybe it doesn't exist at all. Anyhow, we're thrilled by the idea, stateside, as they say. So crowdsourcing, of course, is something where necessarily you're working from heterogeneity to a new and necessarily richer kind of signal. Consumer collaboration, this is the recent work by Campbell's, has finally embraced the Andy Warhol connection. And this is the store that is kind of the flagship store for J. Crew. And J. Crew is a kind of upper middle class, upper middle level clothing supplier. In fact, you could probably buy most of these. In fact, these clothes may be from J. Crew, for all I know. And so they're building a new kind of a new place in downtown Manhattan. In the old days, you would blow out wherever you wanted your store to be, and it would be all glass and metal and so on. And somebody had the wit to say, "Oh, this liquor store is perfect. Don't change a thing." And it's just wonderfully kind of effective it's a little like that London club we were looking at a moment ago. So this is a kind of murmur marketing, right? Now the brand called J. Crew defers absolutely to what existed in this spot before. It just says, no, we don't come in as J. Crew and colonize this space. No, we sort of occupy it, and we honor what was there before, and we draw cultural meanings out of it into our J. Crew brand. Our J. Crew brand is better, richer, more interesting for the fact that it is now, has some connection to this, a liquor store probably left over from the, what do you figure, from this typeface, 30s, 40s? Anyhow, interesting stuff here. So, you know, I think there's a subset within murmur marketing that we can call culturematics. You forgive my being provincial enough to use my own term, but it's just my working term for this category of murmur marketing. And I've written it up in a book, and I brought some, the publisher, bless them, gave me some books, and I brought some books. And Drew, how did we decide what we were going to do with them?
Best questions.
Best questions.
Best questions for the audience. Yeah, we've got 4 copies, so
yeah. So we actually have 2 copies of Culturematic and 2 copies of Chief Culture Officer. So I don't know. That's so embarrassing. The whole thing's completely embarrassing. But there you are. Anyhow, this is part of the mixology revolution. It's a bar called Employees Only. It's in Manhattan, and these guys said, we've been trying to map the mixology revolution. Actually, I think there's a development here from, no, not quite. Anyhow, the mixology revolution is now, we can see it getting started around 1980, and then it kind of goes more mainstream around 2000. And so for the last decade, or the last 13, 14, 15 years, it's been huge in America. And you go into my first, I went into a bar in Boston, and I rolled up to the bar in my best sort of gangster style, and I ordered my drink in that great self-advertising flourish, and the bartender just looked at me. I thought, what? And there was just this pause in which he asserted his dominance over this event and made it clear that the drink I was about to consume was his choice, not my choice. Who cares what I wanted? This was for him to choose. So he said, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your day going? And I described my pathetic circumstances as best I could, cowering before His Majesty. And he said, okay, well, this is what I'm mixing. And so he mixes a drink, and the ice cube, it turns out, so the glass is peculiar. It's not like a glass I've ever seen before, very wide. And it has in the middle of it a square, like a cube, and literally an ice cube. And it's huge. And I say to him, what I want to say is, dude, what's the deal with the ice? But if I realize that I'm here under his sufferance. So I said, excuse me, sir, what's the deal with the ice? And he says, oh, well, we decided that ice shape has better acoustical properties. That's why we use it. So it's like this mixology revolution has transformed everything about this Boston bar. The bartender looks a bit Victorian. Anyhow, I'm sure you've got the mixology things happening here in London, so enough's enough. But these guys did a very interesting kind of variation on the speakeasy part of that mixology trend. Their notion was to create a bar and then to keep it completely secret. And people said, well, what's the point of the bar if you're not going to tell anyone? They said, look, we just don't want anyone to come to our bar. It's our bar. We don't want people to come to our bar. And we said, and so they said, well, we've even anticipated the possibility that somebody could be walking by in the street and they could just barge into our bar. So we're putting employees only on the door so they don't come in. So that's why it's called employees only. So it's just absolutely charming. This is the death of capitalism, right? I mean, what capitalism has always been, and marketing especially in a democratic society has always been bang the drum and cheerful and come on down and everyone's included. And this was exclusive and slightly snooty and acoustical properties, thank you very much, and no, you can't come in. So it's absolutely charming. So what is this? It's the creation of a kind of false scarcity. And it is the triumph of that artisanal impulse over the industrial, it's the, if you think about what Alice Waters did for food in the States, going from industrial and popular to very much, a set of decisions that are much more finely made. Really, this is just, she created Chez Panisse in '73. And this is really just the artisanal revolution come to alcohol somewhat later in the game. But that's exactly what's going on here. But it's a lovely Culturematic. It was brilliantly successful from a marketing point of view. When they attempted to conceal knowledge of this bar, they made it popular knowledge. Knowledge of this thing ran through Manhattan like a wildfire. Everyone wanted to be the person who told you. I remember 5 or 6 people told me about employees only. Have you heard about it? I have this specialized knowledge, a bar nobody knows about. Sir?
There is a place like this in London.
Is there? What's it called? Yes, yes.
Yes, so it's just.
Oh, let's go. You think they won't be open yet?
It's a special route, for example, no hats, no speaking to people you don't know.
Wow.
Or no mobile phones.
What year is it in there?
I think it's speakeasy.
Is it?
It's like
Yeah, yeah. So everyone's packing. Excellent. Great. I mean, I love this. This time travel theme is just happening everywhere now, isn't it? This idea that you can step out of the here and the now into another time and place is so, and it's being done so beautifully. It used to be sort of corny and not very convincing, but well, this may be a little corny, but anyhow. So this is a secret sneaker store in Boston. Has anyone heard of it? It's right downtown. Yes. Yes. Oh, okay. Fair enough. But this is what it looks like. I mean, it's just, it's just a kind of retail horror. And you go in. A friend took me down, and he kept saying, "Look, this is the future of retail." And I'm looking at some guys behind the counter, and he's selling lottery tickets, and he just looks pissed off. And it's all just junk. And he said, "Go up to the Snapple machine." And as I approached it, it suddenly disappeared, and I was in this temple to the sneaker, beautifully lit and appointed. Okay, so all of these are very interesting. I think of them as culturematics because they make culture out of culture, and they make marketing out of the meanings they make meanings and they make marketing out of the interesting kind of game you play with the culture in place. So if there's some rule that says a bar should be totally accessible and democratic and cheerful and welcoming. Cheers, the classic case in point, right? Somebody comes up with a bar that is artisanal in its impulses, but it's really about being absolutely exclusive and snooty and a very different exercise. This kind of playing with culture is, I think, part of the Culturematic enterprise. Here is what's about to happen is I'm going to show you, oh, actually, you had asked, do we need sound? And I think we do need sound for this. Can we plug in? Sorry. So what we're going to look at is Gatorade. drinks in America, especially, well, not especially Gatorade, there's a long tradition of making a connection with celebrity athletes, and the notion is you buy the drink and you participate in the greatness of the celebrity athlete who endorsed the drink. And here's Gatorade taking a completely different point of view. They discovered that there was a game played by a football game, American football game played by two high school teams, and they long and bitter rivals, a 100-year rivalry between these two high schools. They had played a football game that ended in an absolute tie. You'll hear the announcer say, "It's a sister kisser." And that comes from the famous line in American sports. You know, this is a culture so devoted to the notion of winning that the idea of a tie is an abomination. And as they say in the States, a tie is like kissing your sister. So that you'll hear this guy say, "It's a sister kisser, it's a tie game." We're good?
Fingers crossed.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
So they said, to their great credit, I mean, imagine pitching this idea 10 or 15 years ago. They said, look, let's replay this game. Let's see what happens let's do a what if and replay this game with athletes who are now out of shape and kind of it became a simple athletic contest, became poignant and rich and interesting. Anyhow, this is the document that Gatorade made to sort of, to give us a sense of what happened here. Just see if this is, oh, maybe not. Oh, I guess this has to be running for us to know.
Luckily, in the seventh meeting between the State Lions of Culturematics and the Red Rovers of 57-yard field goal attempt. This one is over. A sister kisser.
Time might be worse than a loss. We think we have a score to settle.
Gatorade has chosen to team up with the towns of Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and Easton.
We're inviting the guys from the 93 team to strap on the helmet and the shoulder pads and replay that game to determine the true champion once and for all.
I said to Coach, we're going to come out in sweats and warm up, and he said, no, we go full pads every day. And I'm like, Coach, we're in our 30s. Come on now. Come on.
My first thought was, who are the crazies that are going to suit it up and try and play football?
We shouldn't be doing this.
15 years away from the game, you're just not going to be able to get that kind of finesse in a day.
Rise are certainly showing.
People understand you can't do it. It's too long. 1, 2, 3,
10,000 tickets sold out in 90 minutes. What feels like right now is that 100 degrees. As if you can't do it. They're looking for what? There's nothing to look inside you. Get the extra and play that game.
No matter how old you are, 88, blind, crippled, crazy, you're always an athlete.
This is Bud Cadell. He's a planner in the US. He works for Deutsche in LA now. And when Mad Men was just cresting as the great preoccupation of American culture, he had the very good idea of pretending that he was working in the Mad Men, in the agency, pretending that he was working in the mailroom of the agency featured in Mad Men, and that he had privileged knowledge of the show everyone was watching. So he was delivering this fictional creature called Bud Melman, in whose voice he was now tweeting, was giving us privileged information about what was happening in Mad Men, because he was delivering the mail of the characters, and he was reading their mail in some cases. So for the price of a Twitter account, he found a way to break into the hottest cultural property going in the US, which is to say, he managed to help himself to all this cultural value, and to create this tremendous kind of, this guy is a creature to be reckoned with in the digital world in the US, and for all I know, for Europe as well, on the strength of this very clever intervention. It cost him absolutely nothing, but made him a player in. And then it was a perfect transmedia project, right? Everybody was watching the show on TV, but they were also listening to Bud comment on what was happening. AMC, the producers of the show, went absolutely mad. And what was just about as interesting as Bud's idea here was the way he took them on and said, effectively, the Henry Jenkins proposition. He said, you know, you want fans as passionate as me, and you can't have fans as passionate as me unless you let us engage with the property, unless you give us transmedia access to the reworking of these materials. So it's a great, in fact, this was sort of the beginning Culturematic for me. When I looked at him and what he was doing and tried to think what you needed to think to understand what he was doing, I thought, I have no idea. Back to the early days, 10 years ago, where we thought, what is this? And it was trying to figure it out that sort of led to the Culturematic book. This is a wonderful exercise undertaken by the CDC, as the Center for Disease Control in the States, and it's responsible for encouraging Americans to make ready for every kind of disaster, not just disease, but whatever, forest fires or whatever. And they can't get people to get ready. They spent a huge amount of time and money trying to get people to get extra flashlights and sleeping bags and water and stuff, you know, get ready for the disaster. The guy who was at this time the head of the CDC, an MD and a general, and just a really upstanding looking kind of guy, had the great idea of threatening the American public with a zombie invasion. And it turned out to be fantastically successful. Because Americans who wouldn't get ready for a real disaster would get ready for something that was never going to happen. Just fantastic. And the guy, you know, it's like this guy sort of stumbled in. He's pulling out his hair. And he's like as conventional creature as you could possibly hope to imagine. He's a military man, he's a doctor, and he's a member of this federal bureaucracy. And he comes up with this idea sort of tentatively, and he puts it on his blog, and he thinks, this is kind of stupid, but I'm desperate at this point, and it works fantastically well. So it's a great example of working with contemporary culture, creating a Culturematic to good effect. And this is Wyden and Kennedy. You'll see here that they're sort of teasing us with this point, and I don't have any insider knowledge. But you think about, so it's Wyden and Kennedy saying, look, we wish to make ourselves a platform for your Culturematics. So you figure out what you're going to do in the form of stories, essays, hacks, games, and interviews. And let us enable optimists, mavericks, and mad inventors. And this feels a bit, to me, like the Protestant Reformation. I mean, Wyden and Kennedy is responsible, is the American dreamer. They're responsible for, you know, we think about Nike transforming the way Americans think about their bodies and about health in general. You know, Wyden and Kennedy are the St. George that killed the couch potato. They literally changed American bodies through their work for Nike. So they've been actively changing American culture for many years now, and for them to include other creatives in this process, for them to become an enabler of other people's, of amateur creativity is an astounding, really an astounding development. As I say, it feels a bit like the Protestant Reformation of the 15th and 16th centuries. So anyhow, so that's the kind of a little wee tour of the Culturematic notion. But this is a thing that's happening at the moment that I think it's thrillingly interesting. And see what you think, and let's talk about it. We think about how brands have always used cartoon-like characters to represent the brand. And the classic case in point here is the, Mr. Clean or the Alka-Seltzer guy or the Pillsbury Doughboy. Forgive, these are provincial references. I'm hoping they're recognizable. Are they all of them European, used for European purposes? Or in any case, you recognize them? Yes, okay. So this is the classic kind of brand icon, right? It's a little cartoon character. And it has no voice, and it has no personality, and it has no backstory. But it's human-ish. It's human-like. And so what I want to do is kind of give you the evolution of this creature. So we begin with the cartoon. We then have this creature here, and you may not know her, but she's this kind of agreeable young woman who's now the face of T-Mobile, which is a cell phone company. And she doesn't really have very much more personality, but she's now a little bit more recognizably human. We move forward to this creature, a woman called Flo, who has tons of personality, it turns out. That's her value proposition, now much beloved by the American public. Series of ads, probably 100, maybe more ads in which Flo engages with the world and with the brand in this quirky, kind of interesting kind of way. She's not fully blown she's very much more human in her characteristics, and compared to these people, she's fantastically individuated, but there's still, we're seeing the development go further than Flo, and this is the guy who's being identified by, this is an insurance company, this is Mayhem, and he is this wonderful creature, almost like a mythical creature. It's their personification of the things that can go wrong in your life. To make that kind of vivid, they've created, this guy is an actor who's had, he's a sort of a B actor, he's had some real success, and he's taken on this role of playing Mayhem, and he's very much more individuated. And this is where Virgin Mobile, I'm assuming this campaign is playing here, is it? So this is, Virgin Mobile said, well, we could have a cartoon to represent the brand, or we could have somebody like Flo to represent the brand. But what if we actually went out and, first of all, let's craft characters that feel entirely human for certain purposes, and let's go out and make them exist in the world, because we'll go out and hire an actor and an actress to play these parts in the world. So at celebrity events, Spencer and Sarah would show up, and they looked like two more celebrities, and the celebrity press eagerly took their photo. And when they misbehaved themselves at the event, those events were written up salaciously in the celebrity press. And then at some point somebody said, well, those are not real people, those are brand creatures. They don't really exist outside themselves. Things got more interesting and more complicated when the actress playing Sarah went out with a real celebrity and got written up as kind of this was a hot new relationship. And when somebody pointed out to the celebrity press, well, Sarah isn't real, they said, well, no celebrities are real. It's like, we don't care where this person comes from, we just want the content. So Virgin Mobile, in a very kind of interesting and I think intelligent, playful kind of way, engaged with celebrity culture, actually ended up being an opportunity for us to kind of think about the celebrity culture and about how it works. But what I love about it is that you now have these two people in, it's kind of like we've had a jailbreak. It's kind of like the inmates have escaped the asylum. These people now carry the brand meaning, the brand message, but they're not fully under the control of the brand maker, which is to say, the brand purchased somebody more vital and more interesting and more participating in contemporary culture, but it cost them control. And for certain marketing purposes, of course, everyone looks at this and thinks, conventional marketing wisdom says, for crying out loud, control the message, nail it down, absolutely deliver perfect consistency, and don't ever put yourself in a position where somebody can screw around with the message or hold you at ransom. But that's precisely what they did in this event. I mean, to very interesting effect. And so I love that kind of trade-off. If you want to participate in contemporary, yes, you may participate in contemporary culture, but you're forced to give up some of your control. So anyhow, that's sort of my kind of quick tour of what I think is happening in marketing, with that sense of transition, moving away from bang the drum marketing and then into all those new instruments that we've seen spring up in the last few years, and then to the Culturematics as a particular case in point, and then this brand, what is the next step for this brand creature thing? You can imagine a brand coming to you and saying, well, we'd like you to be a brand representative, and no, we don't really care what you do. We just want, it's like the old days used to be, oh God, an endorsement, that's the end of my creativity, my credibility as an artist, that I'm now somehow, being sponsored by somebody. That used to be the old deal. The new deal is, no, God knows, we don't want you to change at all. We want you to do exactly what you're doing and would have done in any case. We just wish to somehow participate in that halo. Intel recently did a project with Vice magazine in which they reached out to artists to ask them, does you know this campaign? Yeah, so that's marketing taking a quite different attitude. It used to be the commercial proposition was the death of the cultural proposition, and now we're watching the commercial players give up their control, forsake that demand they used to make of people. Now you become a kind of cartoon-like character representing the brand, so you can't engage in the creativity that really interests you. Now the brand is saying, actually, we want all the creativity you can summon and then some. That's what makes you interesting for us. And once that happens, there's no hiding anymore, right? I mean, that's what Nike discovered with offshore manufacture. That's what the new media means, is somebody's got a camera and they're filming your factory in Thailand and done. Right? Everything you do has to be transparent. Now, if there's a takeaway from that authenticity argument, I think that's it. You can't be hiding anything, really. And the other issue here was something. Yeah, so I think that's, in this sense, it really is conversational, that you have to do whatever you're doing here for Oreos, and then you just have to keep changing it because the conversation moves on. So there, the conversation metaphor, I think, really, really works well. But, it's like that guy at the party who just keeps saying the same thing over and over again. Brands are like that, and that's the world away from which they are moving at speed, which is good news for everybody in this room. It now means the absolute semiotic appetite of any given brand has just gone up by a factor of 5 or 10. Because there's so much more stuff has to go into that pipeline and get produced into the world. And then the strategically minded people have to build those beautiful architectures that give us consistency of message, even as we have this fabulous kind of semiotic effervescence going on with this constant change, constant references. I was arguing the other day that we should think about the brand as an 18th century sailing ship. There's ballast in the hold that stays there voyage after voyage as they work the Atlantic. And then there's cargo on the deck that changes with every movement across the ocean. And then there are the big sails that change quite often, and then the little sails that are changed constantly at the captain's whim and will. And that, we need, the meanings that are the brand need to have those broad consistencies and those fine kind of adjustments that are being made. The thing that's thrilling for me now is big data that everybody's talking about, because that big data can tell us how many Manhattans were consumed in Manhattan yesterday between the hours of 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we've been trying to build a time machine to map cultural trends, and we used mixology at this MIT course. And so we were thinking about, well, how could you use big data? And big data is almost real-time reporting of what's happening to your trend. If you think Manhattans are some measure of this trend called the mixology trend, I don't know if they are or not, but let's pretend they are. You can now, every morning you come to your desk and you say, how many Manhattans did they sell? And that's an indicator of what's happening out there. So the corporation has to be more responsive and speak, with this kind of semiotic versatility or effervescence or something. But the good news is it's got all this data coming in, so kind of see where the conversation is going. And I was giving a talk at Adweek last week in Manhattan, and I came to the conclusion, I was talking to the advertising community in Madison Avenue, and I came to the conclusion that you need 30-second spots. There's been this kind of shift on Madison Avenue that says old media, who cares about it, new media, that's everything. And my position is exactly the position, I think, contained in your question, and that is, well, certain meanings you can only create with certain instruments. And to begin only with a murmur, well, you actually can create new brands starting with a murmur, but in many cases, the murmur is made possible by broader statements of what the brand is. Not that those have to be bang the drum, but you probably want to use a 30-second spot. The great case in point here, I think, is the Old Spice spot. So they bought time on Super Bowl Sunday, which is the most expensive advertising you can possibly buy. and they rolled out the guy on the horse, right? And then the stuff, people began to do the transmedia work online, and then they began to respond to that transmedia work in real. My computer's still on North American time, and still trying to tell me what time it is. It's deeply touching that it's the act of solicitude is deeply touching. But so in that case, it's old media and big, huge budgets of a conventional kind, and then the big statements, and then the murmur follows, and they're responding in real time. And you know, the stories are fantastic. I'm trying to think of the name of the guy there who's, but they're just working hammer and tong, trying to keep up with the stuff pouring in and pouring out. So yeah.